I was about to commit treason against a man's own blood for a stranger who ruled half this city with violence and fear. My hand trembled just enough to smudge the ink as I slid the folded napkin onto the white tablecloth beside his vodka glass. From a distance, it looked like a receipt. Up close, if he actually read it, it was a bullet with my name on it, or his brother's, maybe both. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" I asked, like my heart wasn't trying to punch through my ribs. His brother leaned back in his chair, all easy smiles and practiced charm, checking his phone with the casual air of someone who wasn't orchestrating murder. Behind Armen Zatov, the city stretched out through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan at 10 o'clock, a constellation of lights belonging to people whose biggest problem tonight was choosing between the salmon or the steak. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like this. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been in the narrow staff corridor near the kitchen, back pressed against the cold wall, stealing 60 seconds of peace during my break when I heard voices drift through the cracked emergency exit door. Russian. Fast and angry. The accent was thick, unmistakable. I recognized one voice immediately, Bogdan Zatov, the younger brother who always sat at table 7, the one who tipped well and flirted harmlessly with all the servers. Onizdis. Dvayu bara, Odin Yuvkoda na kuknyu, Odin v Twalit, he hissed into his phone. My Russian was barely functional, leftovers from an ex-boyfriend who'd taught me basic phrases between bad decisions and worse arguments. But I caught enough. Dva 2. Bara bar. Vkoda na kuknyu, kitchen entrance. I stopped breathing. His voice dropped lower, sharper, and I heard the words that made my blood go cold. Kogda on side at zie uglovoy stol, tybi dash imit, chisti vistral. I didn't need fluency to understand vistral. I'd heard it in enough action movies. Shot. Clean shot. And then he said the name. Armen. The corridor tilted. Bogdan was talking about his own brother. The man he hugged every time they met. The man who ran the Zatov organization with an iron fist and a reputation that made grown men cross the street. Through the crack in the door, I watched Bogdan pace, one hand raking through his hair, his face twisted with something between rage and desperation. He spoke again, this time in rapid Russian I couldn't follow, his words tumbling out like a confession or a curse. Then he ended the call, slipped the phone into his jacket, and straightened his tie. When he turned toward the dining room, his expression had transformed smooth, brotherly, innocent. I pressed myself flatter against the wall, pulse hammering in my ears. The door swung shut behind him, and I was alone in the corridor with the knowledge that would either save a life or end mine. By the time my break ended and I stepped back onto the floor, it wasn't hard to confirm what I'd overheard. 2 men at the bar, suits too expensive for their awkward posture, nursing the same drinks they'd been holding for 30 minutes. One man lingering near the kitchen entrance, pretending to read the dessert menu. Another outside the restroom, checking his watch every 20 seconds. They weren't here for the food. Table 7, the corner table with the view, sat empty, reserved. Armen's usual spot. My manager, Maria, caught my arm as I passed. Table 7 just walked in. VIP service, Amy. Don't screw it up. I nodded, grabbed a water pitcher with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and watched as Armen Zatov entered the dining room. He moved like a man who owned every space he walked into, broad shoulders filling out a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, dark hair slicked back, a face carved from stone and expensive genetics. His eyes swept the room with the casual vigilance of someone who'd survived this long by never trusting anyone. Bogdan was already at the table, standing to embrace him. Brat. Brother. The hug looked genuine. The smile looked real. I thought I might be sick. I approached their table, water pitcher in hand, smile plastered on like armor. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you with something to drink?" Armin barely glanced at me. He ordered vodka, top shelf, neat. Bogdan ordered wine, still playing the charming younger brother. I turned to leave, then stopped. My hand moved before my brain could stop it, snatching a napkin from my apron, scribbling the words with a pen that barely worked. "Your brothers sold you out. They're in position." I folded it once, twice, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. When I returned with Armin's vodka, I set the glass down first, then slid the napkin beside it, camouflaged against the white linen. "Anything else I can get for you?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. Armin reached for his glass, his cuff sliding back to reveal a watch that probably cost more than my yearly rent. His fingers brushed the napkin. "Read it," I begged silently. "Read it now." He unfolded it with 2 fingers, casual, like this was the 100th note a server had passed him tonight. His eyes scanned the words, and for half a second, nothing changed. Then everything did. His jaw tightened. Just a fraction. The slightest flecks of muscle beneath that stone-carved face. No flinch, no panic, no dramatic glance toward the windows or the bar. Just that single, almost imperceptible shift, the kind you only noticed if you'd spent years reading powerful men's micro-expressions because your tips and your daughter's next meal depended on it. "Is everything all right?" Bogdan asked, leaning forward, eyes narrowing with what might have been concern or calculation. Armin's gaze lifted to mine. His eyes were darker than I'd thought from a distance, cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that could strip you down to your secrets and lies in 3 seconds flat. Up close, they were terrifying. "Stay," he said quietly. One word. Not loud, but absolute. My feet obeyed before my brain processed the command. I stood there, water pitcher clutched like a shield, heart hammering so loud I was sure everyone in the restaurant could hear it. Armin placed the napkin face down on the table, as if it were nothing. As if it didn't say his own brother had just signed his death warrant. Then, with the same calm expression, he reached beneath his jacket. My feet were screaming by hour 9 of a double shift that was supposed to end 3 hours ago. Luminaire on a Friday night was controlled chaos, crystal glasses catching candlelight, the soft murmur of conversations worth more than my annual salary, the sharp click of Maria's heels as she hissed at servers to move faster, smile brighter, be invisible until needed. I was a ghost in a red blouse, refilling water glasses for men in $12,000 suits who never looked at my face. The dinner rush had finally started to thin when I slipped into the staff corridor, my lower back a knot of fire, my smile muscles twitching from overuse. I had 60 seconds before Maria would come looking. 60 seconds to breathe air that didn't smell like truffle oil and entitled wealth. I leaned against the cold wall, eyes closed, thinking about Sophie's field trip permission slip sitting on our kitchen counter, the one that required $40 I didn't have until next week's tips cleared. That's when I heard the voice. Russian. Angry. Close. The emergency exit door at the end of the corridor hung slightly ajar, cigarette smoke curling through the gap. I opened my eyes and saw him through the crack, Bogdan Zatov, pacing tight circles, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand cutting through the air like he was arguing with someone who couldn't see the gestures. I should have walked away. Should have gone back to the floor, back to my tables, back to my safe, invisible existence. But I didn't. Oni's D's, Bogdan snapped into the phone. They're here. That much I understood. Dvayu bara, Odinyuv koda na kuknyu, Odin v toilet. 2. Bar. Kitchen entrance. Restroom. My breath caught. Those weren't locations. Those were positions. Kogda on Syadet za uglovoy stol, when he sits at the corner table. Tybu dash imit, chisty vistral. Clean shot. The world tilted sideways. Vistral. I knew that word. My ex, Dmitri, had shouted it at the TV during action movies, laughing at bad Russian accents. Shot. It meant shot. And then Bogdan said the name that turned my blood to ice. Armin. His brother. He was talking about his own brother. The man I'd served twice before, the one who tipped in hundreds and made eye contact that lasted a second too long. The man whose reputation preceded him like a warning, Armin Zatov, the wolf of Brighton Beach, the king of a criminal empire built on fear and absolute loyalty. Bogdan's voice dropped to a vicious whisper, switching to rapid Russian I couldn't follow, but the tone was unmistakable. Betrayal. Finality. Murder. My pulse hammered against my throat. I pressed my palm over my mouth to muffle my breathing, terrified he'd hear me, terrified of what would happen if he knew someone had listened. Through the crack, I watched him end the call, straighten his tie, smooth his expression into something pleasant and brotherly. When he turned back toward the restaurant, he was smiling. I stood frozen in that corridor, my 60 seconds long gone, holding knowledge that could save a life or end mine. Walk away, my survival instinct screamed. This isn't your problem. These aren't your people. But my hand was already moving toward my apron pocket, fingers closing around a pen. Some choices aren't really choices at all. I forced myself back onto the floor, legs unsteady, hands trembling as I grabbed a water pitcher. Maria shot me a look that said I was cutting it close, but she was too busy seating a party of 8 to lecture me. The restaurant had settled into its late evening rhythm, quieter conversations, dessert menus, the soft clink of coffee cups. Normal. Everything looked so unbearably normal. Except it wasn't. I scanned the room with new eyes, and suddenly the threat materialized like a photograph developing. 2 men at the bar in expensive suits that didn't quite fit right, nursing the same whiskeys they'd been holding for 30 minutes. Another man near the kitchen entrance, pretending to study his phone, his eyes constantly flicking toward table 7. And yes, there, outside the restroom, a 4th man checking his watch. Oni's D's. They're here. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the pitcher. I set it down on the service station, gripping the edge to steady myself, when the energy in the room shifted. Armin Zatov had arrived. He moved through luminaire like he owned it, which, for all I knew, he did. Charcoal suit tailored to perfection, dark hair swept back, flanked by 2 bodyguards who scanned the room with professional paranoia. His presence carved silence through conversations. People noticed. People always noticed. He took table 7 without hesitation, the corner table with the view. His usual spot. The kill zone. Bogdan appeared from the bar, all warmth and enthusiasm, arms spread wide. Brat. The embrace looked genuine. The smile was poison dressed as affection. I didn't have time to think. My hand moved on instinct, snatching a napkin from my apron, scribbling words with a pen that barely worked. Your brother sold you out. They're in position. I grabbed the bread basket, forced my legs to move, and approached their table. My smile felt like it might crack my face in half. Good evening, gentlemen. My voice came out steadier than my hands. I set down the bread, then the napkin, sliding it beside Armin's water glass like it was nothing, like my heart wasn't trying to escape my chest. I turned and walked away before my courage could fail, feeling Armin's presence like heat at my back. 10 seconds. 20. I busied myself at a nearby table, wiping down surfaces that were already clean. Then I heard it, the soft scrape of paper being unfolded. I glanced back. Armin's face remained impassive, carved from granite. But his hand moved, just slightly, beneath his jacket. His lips barely moved as he murmured something in Russian to the man on his left. The bodyguard's eyes went sharp. Everything happened at once. Armin's team moved with lethal precision, 1 man lunging toward the bar, another toward the kitchen entrance. The 2 men at the bar reached for their waistbands. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. The first gunshot cracked like thunder in the confined space. Customers dove under tables. A woman shrieked. More gunfire, short, controlled bursts. I dropped behind the bar, hands over my head, ears ringing. Through the chaos, I heard a roar of rage. Bogdan had lunged across the table, something silver flashing in his hand, a knife. Armin caught his wrist mid-strike, twisting with brutal efficiency. The crack of breaking bone was audible even over the screaming. Armin slammed Bogdan's face into the table with enough force to split the wood. Blood sprayed across white linen. "Betrayal," Armin hissed, his voice cold as winter in Moscow. "Traitor." I watched from behind the bar, frozen in horror, as the man I'd saved destroyed his own brother with his bare hands. The sirens started as distant wails, growing closer, slicing through the ringing in my ears. I'd crawled into the stockroom during the chaos, wedging myself between cases of wine and imported olive oil, my whole body shaking so violently I couldn't stand. The door slammed open. Heavy footsteps. A hand clamped around my arm and hauled me upright. "Boss wants you." "Now." The man was built like a tank, blonde hair cropped military short, face scarred and expressionless. His grip was iron. I stumbled as he dragged me through the destroyed dining room, overturned tables, shattered glass, dark stains spreading across white tablecloths that might have been wine or might have been blood. Bodies on the floor. Not moving. I tried to pull away. "I need to." "Now," he repeated, and shoved me toward the stairs. We climbed to the third floor, to Luminaire's private event room that I'd only glimpsed during training. He pushed me through the door and released me so abruptly I nearly fell. Armin Zatov stood in the center of the room, back to me, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. Blood stained his knuckles. His jacket was gone, shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and what looked like Cyrillic tattoos. The fury radiating from him was tangible, a physical pressure in the air. He turned slowly, and his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath stop. Up close, they were darker than I'd thought, almost black, fathomless, the kind of eyes that had seen things that would break most people. "Who are you?" His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "Amy." The word came out hoarse. "Amy Johnson. I'm just a waitress." "No." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "You are the woman who saved my life and signed your own death warrant." My stomach dropped. "Bogdan's people will come for you," Armin continued, his tone matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "So will his allies. The Chechen Bratva. The Armenians. Everyone who had something to gain from my death now has a reason to want you dead." He paused, letting that sink in. "You have a daughter. Sophie. 10 years old. PS 118 in Queens." Ice flooded my veins. "How do you?" "I know everything about my servers," he said coldly. "Especially the ones who saved my life." He turned to the blonde man. "Nikolai, bring her daughter. She's coming with us." No arguments. Terror spiked through me, white-hot and primal. "You can't just." "I can," Armin interrupted, stepping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "And I will. You saved my life. Now I save yours. But understand this," his hand came up, fingers gripping my chin, forcing me to hold his gaze. "You belong to me now. Your life. Your daughter's life. Mine to protect. Mine to control. You don't leave my sight until every person who wants you dead is in the ground." His thumb brushed my jawline, almost gentle, a stark contrast to the steel in his voice. "Do you understand, Amy Johnson?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Could only nod as my entire world collapsed into this moment, this man, this impossible choice that was no choice at all. "Good," Armin said softly. "Welcome to my world." The drive to Westchester took 40 minutes that felt like hours. Sophie sat pressed against me in the back of the black SUV, her small hand gripping mine with desperate strength. She hadn't spoken since Nikolai had collected her from our apartment, just stared at me with wide, terrified eyes that demanded explanations I couldn't give. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, stroking her hair. "Everything's going to be okay." The lie tasted like ash. The estate materialized from the darkness, like something out of a nightmare, sprawling stone walls, wrought iron gates that opened silently at our approach, armed men stationed at intervals along the perimeter. Floodlights illuminated manicured grounds that stretched into shadow. Security cameras tracked our progress up the long driveway. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. Inside, the mansion was all dark wood and old-world elegance, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. A housekeeper in her 60s, stern-faced and efficient, led us upstairs to a guest suite larger than our entire queen's apartment. 2 bedrooms, a sitting area, windows that overlooked gardens I couldn't see in the dark. "Mr. Zatov requests you do not leave these rooms tonight," she said in accented English. "Anything you need, use the phone. Someone will bring it." Sophie finally spoke after the woman left. "Mom, who are those men? Why did they take us? I want to go home." I pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, and lied again. "We're safe here, sophomore. I promise." An hour later, a knock came. Nikolai stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Boss wants you. The girl stays here. I'm not leaving her. She'll be watched. She'll be safe." His tone left no room for argument. I kissed Sophie's forehead, whispered reassurances I didn't believe, and followed Nikolai through corridors lined with art that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. Armin's study was all leather and mahogany, bookshelves reaching to the ceiling, a fireplace crackling with real flames. He stood at a sideboard, pouring amber liquid from a crystal decanter. When he turned, his shirt was different, fresh, no blood, but his knuckles were still raw. "Sit." He gestured to a chair across from his desk, then poured a second glass. "Tea?" "I don't. It's not a request." He set a cup in front of me, steam rising with the scent of bergamot, then settled into his own chair with his vodka. "Tell me exactly what you heard." "Every word." I recounted it, my voice shaking, the Russian phrases, the positions, the reference to the corner table. Armin listened without interruption, his expression carved from stone, but I saw his jaw tighten when I mentioned the clean shot. "Bogdan was always weak," he said finally, the words edged with contempt. "Jealous. He thought I stole his birthright when our father chose me to lead the organization. He drank deeply. What you don't know is that he'd been negotiating with the Chechen Bratva for months. He promised them control of our territories, Brighton Beach, our ports, our operations, in exchange for backing his coup." My breath caught. So tonight was the culmination of his betrayal. "You disrupted a carefully planned war." His eyes found mine, cold and assessing. "Now both sides want you dead. Bogdan's faction, for betraying them. The Chechens, for ruining their alliance. So what happens now?" My voice came out barely a whisper. Armin leaned forward, his presence overwhelming even across the desk. "Now you live under my protection. You do not leave this estate. You do not contact anyone from your old life, no friends, no family, no one. And you trust that I am the only thing standing between you and a very painful death." He raised his glass in a dark toast. "Welcome to captivity, Amy Johnson." 3 days blurred together in the strange limbo of the estate. Sophie adapted with the resilience of childhood, discovering the library and the pool, making cautious friends with the housekeeper's cat. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop looking over my shoulder even though armed guards patrolled every corridor. On the 3rd night, my phone buzzed. I stared at it in confusion. Nikolai had confiscated it that first night, said it wasn't secure. But here it was on my nightstand, screen glowing with a new message from an unknown number. I opened it. The photo loaded slowly. Sophie's school. PS 118. The familiar red brick facade, the playground, the crossing guard. Taken today, maybe this morning. Below it, words that turned my blood to ice. Pretty little girl. Would be a shame if something happened to her. I was running before I could think, barefoot down the hallway in my pajamas, Sophie's name a prayer on my lips. I found Armin in his study, still dressed despite the late hour, paperwork spread across his desk. "They know where she goes to school," I gasped, thrusting the phone at him. They sent me. His expression transformed. The careful control shattered, replaced by something cold and lethal that made me step back instinctively. He took the phone, read the message, and his jaw turned to granite. Nikolai. The shout brought his security chief running. Armin showed him the phone, spoke in rapid Russian. Nikolai nodded and disappeared. Who? I demanded. Who sent it? We'll find out. Armin pulled a laptop across his desk, fingers flying across the keys. Minutes ticked by. Then his eyes went dark. Alexei Volkov, one of Bogdan's lieutenants. Burner phone, but the metadata traced his usual locations. He stood abruptly, shrugging into a jacket. Stay here. Keep Sophie in your rooms. Do not open the door for anyone except Katya. Where are you? Handling it. His voice was flat, final. He paused at the door, looked back at me. I told you I would protect you. I keep my promises, Amy. Then he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Sat by Sophie's bed, watching her breathe, jumping at every sound. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Dawn was breaking when I heard footsteps in the hall. Armin appeared in the doorway, still in his clothes from the night before. His knuckles were raw and bloody again, fresh bruises blooming across them. He met my eyes, said nothing, just gave a single nod before walking away. I turned on the news that afternoon while Sophie colored in the sitting room. Body of Alexei Volkov, 34, was discovered early this morning in a warehouse in Red Hook. Police are investigating what they're calling a gangland execution. Volkov had ties to organized crime and... I turned it off, hands shaking. That night, I found Armin on the terrace, smoking, staring into the darkness. I approached slowly, unsure what to say, what to feel. Thank you, I finally whispered. He didn't look at me. Just took another drag, exhaled smoke into the night air. Don't thank me for doing what monsters do, he said quietly. Just know that I'll do it again. And again. For as long as you and your daughter need me to. I should have been horrified. Should have run, demanded he let us go, called the police. Instead, I stood beside him in the darkness and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 days. Safe. 3 nights after Alexei Volkov's body turned up in Red Hook, I found myself wandering the estate at 3 a.m., unable to silence the questions circling my mind like vultures. The guest suite felt suffocating despite its size. Sophie slept peacefully in the adjoining room, but I couldn't stop seeing Armin's bloody knuckles, couldn't stop hearing the news anchor's clinical description of gangland execution. The terrace doors were open, curtains shifting in the night breeze. Armin stood at the railing, cigarette glowing orange in the darkness, his silhouette sharp against the city lights sprawling in the distance. He didn't turn when I approached, but I knew he'd heard me. Men like him always knew. Can't sleep. His voice was rough, tired in a way I hadn't heard before. Not really. I stopped beside him, keeping careful distance. How do you live like this? Always looking over your shoulder. Never trusting anyone. The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he exhaled smoke and spoke, his words measured and deliberate. When I was 12, I watched my father's rivals torture him for information. His jaw tightened. They had him for 3 days. Used tools I still see in my nightmares. He gave them nothing. They killed him anyway. He turned to face me, and in the dim light his eyes were haunted. I learned 2 things that night: loyalty is everything, and mercy is a luxury I cannot afford. My chest constricted. Armin. Bogdan forgot that, he continued, his voice hardening. He thought blood would protect him. He was wrong. The implication hung between us like a blade. What will you do to him? I whispered. What he deserves. Flat. Final. Then his expression shifted, something almost vulnerable crossing his features. You didn't have to warn me. You could have walked away. Why didn't you? I met his gaze, this dangerous man who'd killed for me, who'd turned my life inside out. Because letting someone die when I could stop it, that's not who I am. Even if that person is you. Something changed in the space between us, the air charged with understanding, recognition. He reached out slowly, his bloodied knuckles brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met," he said softly, "or the most foolish." "Maybe both," I breathed. His thumb traced my jawline, and neither of us moved away. The FBI arrived on a Tuesday morning, black sedans rolling up the estate's driveway with the confidence of federal authority. Agent Sarah Briggs was exactly what I expected: sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of woman who'd clawed her way up through a male-dominated institution and had the edge to prove it. "Ms. Johnson, I have a warrant to question you regarding the incident at Luminaire Restaurant." She held up the paperwork like a weapon. "You can come voluntarily, or I can make this difficult." Armin appeared in the foyer, composed and immaculate despite the early hour. "She goes nowhere without counsel." He nodded to the woman beside him, Katia Volkov, his lawyer, impeccably dressed in Armani, her expression as cold as her client's. "No relation," she'd told me earlier with dry humor. The interview room in Lower Manhattan was deliberately intimidating: concrete walls, fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor. Katia sat beside me, silent and watchful, while Briggs set up a recording device. "Let's talk about Armin Zatov," Briggs began, her tone deceptively gentle. "The man you're living with. Do you know what he's responsible for? Dozens of murders. Human trafficking. Racketeering. Extortion." She leaned forward. "He's using you, Amy. The moment you're no longer useful, you'll disappear. Just another body we'll never find." My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression neutral. "Witness protection can keep you and your daughter safe," Briggs continued. "New identities. New life. All you have to do is testify against him." She opened a folder, spreading crime scene photos across the table. Bodies. Blood. Violence captured in clinical detail. My hands clenched in my lap. "Is this who you want protecting your daughter?" Briggs demanded. I stared at the photos, then at her eager expression, and suddenly saw it clearly: she didn't care about me or Sophie. We were leverage. A means to an end. The FBI wanted to use me just as much as anyone else. "I have nothing to say," I said quietly. "I didn't witness any crimes." Briggs's face hardened. "You're making a mistake. When he turns on you, and he will, don't come crying to us." Back at the estate, Armin was waiting in his study. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," I said, meeting his eyes. Because there was nothing to tell. For the first time since I'd met him, Armin Zatov smiled, genuine, unguarded, transforming his severe features into something almost beautiful. "You surprised me, Amy Johnson." The encrypted email arrived 2 weeks after the FBI interview, forwarded through a contact I didn't recognize, someone who'd gotten my information from God knows where. The subject line read, "Your story deserves to be told. Marcus Chin, investigative journalist for The Times." He'd been contacted by Bogdan Zatov, currently held in an undisclosed location, who wanted to expose his brother's criminal empire. But he needed corroboration. He needed me. "This is your chance," the email read. "Freedom. Safety. A way out. Call me." I stared at the phone number until it blurred. Freedom. The word tasted like something I'd forgotten existed. That evening, Armin found me in the library. He didn't rage or accuse. Just closed the door quietly and asked, "Do you want to leave?" My throat constricted. "I don't know." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming but not threatening. "Then let me be clear. If you testify, I cannot protect you. The FBI will lock you away in some anonymous town, give you a new name, and Sophie will grow up with no past. No friends. No memories. You'll spend your life looking over your shoulder anyway, because my enemies are patient. They have long memories." He paused, his dark eyes searching mine. "Or you stay here. With me. And I swear on my father's grave, no one will touch you." "How did you?" I started. "I monitor everything that could threaten you," he said simply. "It's not a violation of trust. It's survival." I thought about Sophie. settling into her new school, making friends for the first time without the constant anxiety of unpaid bills and eviction notices. I thought about the way Armin had kept every promise, brutal though his methods were. I thought about witness protection, a gilded cage with different bars. That night, I burned the journalist's contact information in the study fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken. 3 days later, Nikolai delivered the news over breakfast. Bogdan Zatov was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide. Armin's expression didn't change. He simply continued reading his newspaper, coffee cooling beside him. I set down my fork carefully, my hands steady. How tragic. Our eyes met across the table. I didn't ask for confirmation. He didn't offer explanation. Some truths didn't need speaking. 3 months transformed everything. Sophie thrived at Riverside Academy under the name Sophie Miller, making friends with children of diplomats and CEOs, unburdened by the poverty that had shadowed her childhood. I no longer jumped at shadows or tested locked doors. The estate had become something I hadn't expected home. I was reading in the library when Armin found me, his presence shifting the air before he spoke. I need to tell you something. I marked my page, meeting his eyes. I'm listening. He sat across from me, uncharacteristically hesitant. You stopped being a responsibility I owed and started being something I couldn't afford to lose. My heart stuttered. You want me to stay? I want you to stay, he confirmed. But not as my guest. Not as someone I'm protecting out of obligation. Then what? I challenged, rising to face him. As my equal. My partner. The woman who sees me for what I am and chose me anyway. I closed the distance between us, my voice steady and certain. If I stay, it's on my terms. No more secrets. No more making decisions about my life without me. No more keeping me in the dark to protect me. We're partners, Armin. That means trust. Complete trust. He studied me with those fathomless dark eyes, and then did something that would become legend among his men. He dropped to one knee before me, this man who bowed to no one, who ruled through fear and absolute authority. "Я доверяю тебе свою жизнь, Amy Johnson," he said in Russian, then switched to English, his voice rough with emotion. "I trust you with my life. Я люблю тебя. You are the only thing in this world I would burn my entire empire to protect." I pulled him to his feet and kissed him, not with uncertainty or fear, but with the fierce certainty of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged transformed, unbreakable. 2 weeks later, I stood beside Armin in the conference room where the Bratva Council convened, 12 men who commanded empires built on blood and loyalty. They stared at me, the American waitress, the outsider, but I didn't flinch. Armin's hand found mine beneath the table, his grip solid and sure. "Gentlemen," he said in Russian, then English for my benefit, "meet my partner." I was no longer invisible, no longer afraid. A waitress who saved a king and became a queen in a kingdom where power was the only currency that mattered. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories. Your comments mean the world to me. Let me know what you thought and what kind of stories you'd like to see next. Until next time, keep watching and stay mysterious.